What's up everybody, D-Man back. Welcome to a brand new video, and today we're going to be reviewing the soundtrack for Godzilla -1. So a couple years ago when Godzilla King of the Monsters was coming out, I got to sit down and review the entire soundtrack with you guys, going song by song, and I really loved doing that. I've kind of wanted to do it every now and again, like maybe with Singular Point or with Godzilla vs. Kong, and I just didn't for one reason or another. With GVK it was kind of because I was on hiatus at that time, and also because I had a lot of negative things to say about that, and I just didn't want to be spreading negativity about the soundtrack or about the film, so I just kind of held off on that one. And then with Godzilla -1, I've really wanted to do this for a while, and I just haven't really known when the best time would be. But with the International Film Music Critic Association nominating Naoki Sato's Godzilla -1 score for both Score of the Year and as the best original score for a fantasy/science fiction film, I figured now was as good of a time as any to talk about the question that has been on my mind a lot since I saw the movie. Is Godzilla -1's soundtrack the best score for any Godzilla movie? And to jump into it, I want to go song by song to break down my thoughts on each of these songs. And I'm not going to do very in-depth breakdowns of the music like I've done for some of the songs in the past from different Godzilla movies. This is going to be much more like that King of the Monsters video. But I do want to go over all of my thoughts on the music to talk about if I think it all really is that good. Starting out with the track Fear. Now this one I immediately was blown away by, not only in theaters, but on my return to America when I was listening to it in the car the very next day. It just has this incredible blend between Halloween Kills and Mandy. If you've seen either of those films and are familiar with the soundtracks, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. This blasting, ominous horns that just feel like horror embodied, that is what this song is all about. This is an incredibly atmospheric song with a super ominous build-up. It's a really cool establishment of some uneasy motifs that they use throughout the film. In songs like Portent, these kind of motifs of these swelling arpeggios come in, and it's really awesome. Then the lower horns kick in towards the end of the song. They just have so much weight, they create so much unease and fear and tension. It's great. Godzilla's attack at the very end of the song has this fantastic frantic energy, and it's needed because it sustains the entire scene. It makes it super uncomfortable. The blaring horns definitely underscore the horror of the moment, and it is used in one of the most striking moments in the entire movie and really sets the stage for the entire soundtrack. Now the soundtrack doesn't go in the order of the movie. I'm not entirely sure why they do that, but I think they're kind of linking songs thematically within this soundtrack. At least that's kind of how it feels, because the next one that plays in the film is actually Pain, whereas the next one on the soundtrack and the next one we're going to talk about is Portent. I didn't even know what this word was. I'd never heard of it before, but it's a warning or an uneasy feeling that something momentous or calamitous is about to happen. And that is exactly what it's used for in the film. It's pulling from the uneasy motifs in Fear and then amplifying them to create this pure atmospheric tension that's sustained over the course of the song. The sustained horns towards the middle to the end of the song create the feeling that we are truly on the edge of danger. It's used when the Shin crew discovers the downed American ship and they realize that they're there basically as Godzilla bait in one of the more incredible moments in the movie. And I love it. It's just such a great song. I really love the intro to it in particular. I think it's fantastic. Next up we have Confusion, which is by far the most unsettling song to listen to, maybe out of any Godzilla movie. Actually, you know what? There's some really uncomfortable songs on the soundtrack to Godzilla vs. Megalon of all things that I really hate to listen to. Those ones are really yucky, but not the same way. This song, Confusion, is really wonderfully done. Taking the drones to their absolute limit here, Confusion is the embodiment of anxiety. You want to know how to have a really uncomfortable experience listening to this song? Try listening to this song at 2 a.m. driving home from work in the middle of downtown while there are police everywhere and crashed cars on the road. You're gonna feel like you're gonna die. This song is truly creepy. From what I can tell, it sounds like they're sampling air raid sirens, which is brilliant because it ties this song into the wartime aesthetic perfectly and also makes Godzilla all the more horrific and kind of makes him feel like a walking tornado, like a natural disaster come to life. It's wonderful. The buildup is done very well, with the ending being this incredibly creepy, almost sounding like someone's moaning in anguish or in pain in the background. It's really great. As a piece of music though, this is probably the least interesting one to listen to on the soundtrack. I don't love to turn this one on. I do think it complements the scene it's in perfectly, but the fact that it's mostly just a sustained drone the whole time. I just can't say as a piece of music it's the best one to listen to. Next we have Godzilla Suite I. Oh my god, absolute perfection. What are we doing? It's just so good. This is Akira Ifukube's Mothra vs. Godzilla main title from 1964. It's used here to underscore Godzilla's villainous deeds, and it is done so incredibly. This is a wonderful modern re-recording of one of Godzilla's best songs he's ever had. It is full of that classic Godzilla flair that we've come to know and love. When the Ifukube Godzilla music kicks in, it's like, oh shit, things are about to go down. You're like getting that classic Godzilla blood injection into the movie. It's great. The Ifukube music does kind of sound slightly out of place when put with the rest of the soundtrack. It almost is jarring compared to the rest of the music because the rest of it's so ethereal. But the fact that they're using this incredible re-recording rather than just a remaster of the original audio really helps to sell it and really helps blend it into the rest of the music. This uses Godzilla's music as it was meant to be used. A Godzilla destruction theme has now been returned to its home in a Godzilla destruction sequence, and it's amazing. Now, one thing that is a little odd about this one is that Mothra's motif is still in here, and that was really surprising to hear in theaters for the first time. I think it does work very well in context of the movie and in context of the scenes, but for hardcore fans such as myself who are very familiar with the fact that that is Mothra's motif, it's kind of weird hearing it during a Godzilla rampage. Godzilla's rampage motif from Mothra vs. Godzilla is already used at the same point in a very similar song in the 1964 film, and that song would have been a perfect one to slot into this scene where you wouldn't have had the Mothra motif. However, it would have thrown off the entire timing of the whole scene. So I get why from the musical perspective you're going to go with this version, the main title version, rather than the Godzilla Rampage version, and I also get why you're going to go with this from an editing perspective because it helps the pacing of the sequence. Next up we have what many consider to be the main title for Godzilla -1, and that is the track Divine. This is a powerful, heavy, moody, and ethereal theme. It is so good. It is one of the coolest songs ever featured in a Godzilla film. It's full of the weight and fear that Godzilla embodies. The choir and the horns add this mythical quality to Godzilla, and it never fails to elicit the biggest goosebumps when it kicks on during the film. At first, it's almost epic, where it feels like the Tako is here to save the day, and then you realize that, oh man, they have just put themselves in the line of fire of an unstoppable creature. It's incredible. It's such an incredible song. The ending of the song has this intensity and epicness, and it reminds us of Persecution of the Masses, what is arguably one of the greatest Godzilla songs ever written. This has a little more simplicity, and it makes Godzilla feel even more divine. Now, I personally, while I wouldn't touch the track Divine, would have loved to hear that song go on to be developed a little further in the film. I don't know where I would have played it, maybe during Godzilla's Rampage in Ginza, or somewhere along the lines of that. Well, there is a second variation of this song that plays that we'll talk about a little later. The main part. Bam, 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 bam. I would have liked to hear that kind of developed into its own motifs the way that I tried to do with my custom themes for -1. That would have been pretty exciting to hear. It would have given it a little bit more of a Persecution of the Masses type feel, but hey, maybe in a sequel or something, I don't know. Elegy, perhaps the most underrated song on the entire soundtrack. This one is truly the soul breaker of the film, and it brought me to tears nearly every single time I watched the movie, and even some of the times I listened to the music on its own. The slow, melancholy build-up carries with it the sense of longing needed to convey Shikishima's grief, and it is truly a somber masterpiece. The crescendo into the masterful spin on the Dies Irae, probably the song best associated with death out of anything ever written. It just creates the sense of loss and mourning that we need to grieve the atomic bomb, and that we need to experience Shikishima's emotions, and that we need to feel the loss of Noriko. It's incredible. It is one of the most powerful songs ever written for a Godzilla film, and is such an incredible piece of music that if you swap it into like a ton of other scenes of random movies, it elevates the emotion of them every single time. I did it as a little editing exercise just for myself for fun, and every single time you add it to a scene, it makes the scene feel so much more grand and emotional and impactful because it's such an incredible piece of music. The high trebled strings contrasting with the enormous booming undertones, capturing the feeling of dread, loss, and devastation experienced by Shikishima in the moment, and make it one of my favorite songs on the soundtrack. Ifukube's nostalgia aside, and the fact that I think Divine is just so freaking incredible, this might be my favorite song on the soundtrack. It kind of goes goes back and forth between Divine and Elegy for me depending on which mood I'm in. Next up is Mission, which I also think is a very underrated song on this soundtrack. As with a few of the songs in the soundtrack, it feels pretty similar to the works actually of Howard Shore, which is one of my favorite composers, which is awesome. Mission starts slow, pulling in some of the anxious themes from Fear and Portent, which is really cool, before swelling into a more hopeful counterattack to the music we've heard thus far. The higher strings and the more triumphant horns give spirit to the song and help to carry the pace of that conference scene very well. I actually really love this song, not only in the film but also outside of it. It also has these underlying horror themes to it, these themes of danger, which are really cool. Next up is Hope. This is a beautiful melody with levity and life. It's a very peaceful addition to the soundtrack, and we now transition into the more peaceful section of the soundtrack. We've gone from fear to hope, which is really cool. Literally in the structure of the soundtrack, that's how the music has progressed. This leads into Honor, which is exactly the opposite of Portent. This is actually used a couple times in the film. It has a similar intro to Portent, but it adds in these middle tones and these horns and these strings to create this feeling of movement and positivity. It's really cool. And then it swells into a beautiful crescendo that just is full of hope and peace and heart. It's wonderful. And then that brings us to Pride, which almost comes across as a somber reflection to the other music. This is another very peaceful, reflective song that feels a little sentimental. It perfectly captures the feeling of Noda's speech when it's given. It just feels like it represents life and coming together to support one another, and then builds up to this very pleasant peak, embodying not only longing but also hope and love. It's by far the most tranquil song on the soundtrack, and I really love it. This gets us into Pain, a fantastic embodiment of post-war loss, sorrow, and depression, kind of the theme of the war in the movie. The soft, desolate strings slowly coming in and then fading out like waves of grief sound like they were pulled straight from the Oppenheimer soundtrack. Towards the end of the song, we're being brought back into the anxiety caused by Godzilla in a very subtle way. It's very cool. And then we start to shift away from fear and towards sorrow. It's really neat. And the way the song grows over time reflects the growing feelings within Shikishima before slowly diminishing, mirroring his character arc. And this brings us to what I believe truly is the main theme for Godzilla -1, and also what I think is a genuine masterpiece that there's nothing more that I think could be done with this song. It's just perfection. And that is Resolution. This is such a great song. The song has energy and excitement and heart. It's filled with hope and courage and power. When the horns eventually kick in, they are truly beautiful and create what I feel is the definitive sound of Godzilla -1. This is used a couple times in the film, and it just adds this incredible energy to the movie. It really helps to sustain that 40-minute stretch without Godzilla towards the end. It's a wonderful song, and is also used during what I think is one of the best sequences of the movie when Shikishima takes to the air. The building horns and eventual choir that break through and almost explode into the song almost abruptly is really incredible because somehow it manages to work really well. And all the while all that chaos is going on, it still has this beautiful feel to it, and underneath it all, it solidifies Shikishima's bravery in the face of danger as his motif never wavers. The choir is used to represent this almost mythical quality of Godzilla while maintaining that Shikishima theme, and it creates this conflict within the song itself of Godzilla versus Shikishima. Shikishima's melody ultimately winds up being the one that comes out victorious, playing in the end, and that is what I think is the coolest thing about this song, is that this song itself almost represents the entire movie of Godzilla -1, and certainly represents Shikishima's arc from bravery to fighting his fear head on, and then eventually to prospering. And that gets us into Godzilla Suite II. Oh man, this might be the best use of Ifukube's music since he passed away. It is a perfect spin on the Godzilla vs. Destroya ending theme, which was the last time Ifukube ever got to score Godzilla. That was the culmination of not only the Godzilla themes, taking the villainous Godzilla theme and merging it with the Godzilla March, but it also built upon the very iconic King Kong vs. Godzilla main title. This was the best way to reward Godzilla fans that we could have ever gotten in the film. It's the perfect use of Godzilla's March as it's been restored to its original purpose, not as Godzilla's destruction march, but as a military march used against Godzilla in combat. The King Kong vs. Godzilla theme is also a wonderful inclusion here because it has the energy to sustain Godzilla's march and keep it going for nearly 5 minutes without becoming stale. I've talked in the past about some Godzilla themes which completely lack the energy needed to beat Godzilla, and this has it all. I mean, this is why Godzilla is what he is. This music right here is what made that original movie work so freaking well, and hearing it masterfully brought back to the modern day is so cool. This is a perfect reminder of what Godzilla's music should be. It's epic, grand, energetic, and truly classic. It also has a super fun and exciting ending, bringing in those Godzilla vs. Destroya themes, which adds this levity and nostalgia to the final battle, and it helps keep the film, and especially the ending of the film overall, from feeling overly heavy. I really love the way it ends. Dun, 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 and the way it's used in the film with Godzilla going So good. One of the best moments in the entire movie. Next up, we've got Unscathed, which is an even more dangerous and aggressive version of Divine, with the horror and uncertainty that goes along with the moments it's played in being perfectly conveyed. This is reused a couple times in the movie. First, it's obviously building upon Divine, which plays when Godzilla attacks the taco, but then it's played again when he's charging up his beam, and is incredible and mythical and epic, and then it plays when Godzilla resists death at the hands of the ocean pressure, solidifying Godzilla as a true threat and giving him more weight than we have ever seen provided to the character in a long time. And that leads us into Last, an incredible song that feels almost like a sequel to Unscathed and Resolution. This is a fantastic final battle. The uneasy tension at the start building into these powerful horns that are just fast enough to give energy to the song, while also being slow enough to truly feel like effort is being exerted even just to get to the next note. I don't know quite how to explain this, but the song feels like a physical exertion of energy. This song is almost what it feels like to actually try and overcome an enormous obstacle. It's the manifestation of powering through adversity and physical accomplishment. Every note we linger on just long enough to get to the next one, and it feels like the effort of those ships pulling Godzilla to the surface is our effort to lift a heavy boulder or weight off our shoulders. It's great. And that leads us into Prayer. I think Prayer is a wonderful song. Ironically, it might be my third least favorite to listen to on the soundtrack. I think Confusion and Pain I'd rather listen to less than this, but Pray is still this wonderful, somber, reflective song, but it still has hope to it all at the same time. Pray uses the choir now as a way to mourn the loss of Godzilla rather than to amplify him to godlike status. It shows the sacrifice of all those involved in the battle against Godzilla, and it's really wonderful. The stringed section in the middle is just beautiful, and it gives way to this perfect finale with the solo singer. Then the piano comes in with this almost innocent, childlike melody while the singer is just blasting away in this incredible finale that leaves us with levity and hope, but also a somber feeling of loss. It is so good. Next, we have Godzilla Suite III, and this truly is the peak of Godzilla's music. This right here is the peak. I don't know how we could do any better. This is the most masterful rendition of Akira Ifukube's Godzilla theme that I believe we have ever heard. This is what Bear McCreary's theme almost was, nearly, but wasn't. McCreary made the right calls with what he did for his version of Godzilla's theme because it really helped suit King of the Monsters as a whole. But this, I think, is truly the perfect rendition of Ifukube's Godzilla music. It's got this super uneasy transition from Godzilla's villainous theme into his march that reminds us that while we're getting into this energetic and happy march that we all know and love, Godzilla's presence is still that of horror. It's really cool. While McCreary's Godzilla theme was a little more epic and grand than this version, and the use of the choir was there to give Godzilla a nearly godlike quality, I really prefer the simplicity of just adapting Ifukube's theme as was. I think it's far more powerful depending on the context, and while I sometimes get a little distracted by the chanting in that McCreary version, this one loses that. It's just wonderful. If I had to rank Godzilla themes, just Godzilla marches, I would put this one probably as number 1, Singular Points as number 2, and then McCreary's as number 3. I think they're all really well done. Well, the soundtrack is over, but there are a couple songs left. Now, there are some unreleased songs that aren't on the soundtrack, and the most notable ones are the montage song, which is that nice little guitar plucky song that plays when we're seeing Shikishima's life being rebuilt. It's a nice, refreshing change of pace from the rest of the very moody soundtrack, but it almost feels a little too different and feels a little out of place. I do really like it, but I think it's licensed music, so it doesn't exactly fit perfectly with the rest of the tone. It is used very well for that montage, and I wouldn't change it at all. And then finally, we get into what I call the Kiryu Saga song, and this is when Shikishima's admitting to Noriko that he abandoned the war. It is a beautiful and underrated song that captures both the tragedy of Shikishima and also the compassion of Noriko. It's great. And that gets us to the final question here. Is Naoki Sato's Godzilla -1 soundtrack the best score for any Godzilla movie? I think that just comes down to personal preference, obviously. For me, there are a couple Godzilla soundtracks that stick out as being the best Godzilla soundtracks. There's obviously the 1954 soundtrack, which depending on my mood and depending on how nostalgic I'm being, I'm gonna say that's my favorite, definitively my favorite. It's where all of these themes were established. It's also got the wonderful prayers for peace and Godzilla at the ocean floor, which I think are just incredible pieces of music. Then there's also Mothra vs. Godzilla from 1961, which I think is truly where Ifukube honed his skills and really nailed what he was doing with Godzilla's sound. That soundtrack doesn't have a single song that falls flat. I think the whole thing is wonderful. Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah from 1991 is where Ifukube perfected his Godzilla theme for the first time, but that soundtrack has a lot of music that I think really weighs it down. Similarly, Godzilla vs. Mothra from 1992 I think is a really great soundtrack, but there are quite a few songs on that I'm not the biggest fan of. Godzilla King of the Monsters, I think, has one of the greatest soundtracks in the entire franchise history, but there are some things that I don't love about it. I'm not the biggest fan of Ghidorah's theme. I'm not the biggest fan of Rodan's theme. While I've grown to like those a lot more than when I initially reviewed them, I'm still not their biggest fans. And then the chanting overall in that soundtrack kind of gets a little grating at times, so I can't say that one's my favorite. Shin Godzilla, I think, could have been, although it's a little repetitive at times, and I really wish they did re-recordings rather than remasterings of the original songs. I get what they were doing stylistically, but it is a little jarring to hear. So I'm not going to say Shin Godzilla, even though Persecution of the Masses is just like the best thing ever. So I really love it. And that gets into what I believe might be my favorite Godzilla soundtrack, and I really don't know. It is kind of in a head-to-head versus battle with -1 for me at the moment between which one I like more, and that's Godzilla Singular Point, which had incredible range, going from incredibly silly and goofy to downright horrific, to then eventually mythical and divine and ethereal, the same way that -1 is. Maybe the reason that I would edge out Singular Point over -1 is because Singular Point has more range and more variety, but -1 I think was better at what it was doing than Singular Point was. I think Singular Point occasionally has songs that I'm not the biggest fan of, whereas -1, there's not a single song on that soundtrack that I don't like. It's just a matter of how much do I like them. Ultimately, it comes down to which one plays better outside of the context of its project. I think the Singular Point soundtrack is easier to listen to outside of the context of the film and the show, whereas -1, some of the music, like I said, Confusion or Portent, they get a little strange to listen to outside of the context of the movie. All that to say, I think that they are wonderful soundtracks. Those comprise my top Godzilla soundtracks, however many I listed off right there, I'm not sure, and it just kind of depends on my mood. I think honestly it comes down to Mothra vs. Godzilla, where that's just one where I think every song on it is absolutely great. Godzilla 1954, because it's where all of this began. Singular Point, where I think they really nailed a lot of what they were going for, and they have so much variety and so much fun, and then also balance it against horror or tragedy. It's really cool. And then -1, which is just perfection at what it was trying to do. I think -1 is the most successful at accomplishing what it was trying to accomplish out of all of the soundtracks, and that is what I can say about it. As far as do I think it should win the awards? Maybe. Oppenheimer's music I think is really revolutionary, especially Can You Hear the Music is just such an incredible piece of music, but I do think -1 should certainly win the genre award. Absolutely. I definitely think it should win the genre award. I'm so glad it was nominated because it truly is a masterful soundtrack, and I'm so glad that Naoki Sato got to do this and work with Takashi Yamazaki to bring forth one of the greatest Godzilla soundtracks of all time. What do you guys think of the Godzilla -1 soundtrack? Where does it rank for you amongst other Godzilla soundtracks? I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching. I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. If you want to support the Patreon, you can use the link in the description below. By supporting the Patreon, you are directly supporting this channel and making sure that I can continue to make videos like this for you guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you guys next time for the next one. D-Man out.